Hello everyone, good evening, greetings, how are we all, and welcome to, doing well, screwed up the intro already, welcome to Chilliteracy, happy Wednesday! Oh, I have a clothes moth that I need to kill, can I be bothered? No, it can live its life, and eat all my clothes. How are we all doing? Welcome in. As Sam said, Book Week is defeated. Book Week is no more for this year, sad times. You're now back to our regularly scheduled? Wow. It's almost like this is a reading stream and words escape me. Regularly scheduled streams. So I'm back reading you some short stories. You have too many tabs open, almost couldn't find us again. Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely not looking at all my tabs right now. Definitely not opening another one because I realise I haven't got tonight's text lined up for you. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. Everything is fine. Where's Gutenberg? Gutenberg! There you go. Found it. No. Oh god, this moth's getting up in my face. Shoo. Please. But yes, hello everybody. How are we all doing? I hope we are well. There we go. You have reduced the number of tabs due to changing browsers. Ah, nice. I have many tabs. Yumika, hello, welcome in. Thank you very much for subscribing for 36 months in a row. Thank you ever so much. Also, thank you to me and Sam for also subscribing. And I think, did I miss... For some reason my chat's not loading before. Did I miss, like, was it Ray Tracer? Oh, there we go, Ray Tracer, yes. I found it. I'm just being dense. Thank you very much, Ray Tracer, for resubbing as well. It's always very welcome. Thank you, everybody. You were down to a reasonable number, then you started wikiing. Oh yeah, I need to catch up with the next episode of Quake of Carelon, sorry. I need to wiki that. You think you have about 20-ish now, from like 60 to 80 you had before. Okay, that's a lot even by my standards. I think mine's probably around like 30-ish. I think. Yes. We're back to tabs talk. Oh, excuse me. Oh. But yes, hello everybody. Hello Andy, hello Raytracer, hello Llama, hello Elenia. Hello Lynn, hello Lynn Stoffleys. Who have I missed? Andy Pants, did I say you? Hi. Yumika, hello. Parola, hello. Andy, 129. 129. Wow. Okay. That is... Good lord. You mad person. Yeah, you do have a problem. Even I will say that you have a problem. 129 is far too many tabs. Do you have like a particularly wide screen or something? How do you even know? Like what tabs? I mean, across 4 windows. Across 4... How many screens do you have? Good lord. Anyway, yes. Hello Sherlock Holmes and Jason Isaacs, of course. More than 15 is way too many. Yeah, you see, yeah, this is what... Lady Mephistopheles, exactly. This is what I do as well, using tabs as bookmarks, because object permanence. Just one screen, Andy. Right, you're oh, and Yumika, right, you're often close to 100. Good lord. Oh, the grouping... Oh, yeah, the grouping option's dangerous. You have a Firefox extension to help manage them. Oh, dear. Surely that's just enabling your problem. Yeah, I have a few, like, a lot. Most of my tabs are genuinely important and needed, and I sort of have them there because I know I can tick them off at certain points. Manage, enable, tomato, wrong way around. You downloaded so many Firefox extensions. Oh dear. Sherlock Holmes is napping hard. Nothing can wake him up. Well, I'm gonna do a Sherlock Holmes story today, so he better be awake. But yeah, that's the thing, is like, bookmarks disappear. Like, they are not in front of you the whole time, so if it's something sort of vaguely important but not like immediately important, I just find it easier that I can sort of open up my browser and go, oh yeah, those are the, like, I've got a big thing for like arts stuff funding. I've got a big old group of tabs for that. I was like, oh, I need all of these because these are specific dates that I need to remember. And sure, I may have written the dates down, but actually having the visual stimuli of those are the logos of these funding organisations kind of prods me a little bit more because I have many things to think about all the time anyway. But yes, you have things you bookmarked years ago and you don't remember why. Weird random pages in the deep recesses. Yeah, I used to have that until I did do a purge. I did a tab purge, and it's obviously going very well. Oh, you want to buy this? Opens a new tab. Yeah, I'm not bad at that. That's the thing. Is like I will close tabs that I go, ooh, it's a thing, and I close it. Like most of my tabs are ongoing things. Like they are things that I will need to keep referencing back to for reasons of, I don't know. Yeah. Usually work related. Not a lot of my tabs are non-work related. So, well, I have just seen one that I can absolutely close, but I won't do that right now. So, yeah. So welcome to Tab Talk, everybody, where we talk about how many tabs we have open on our browsers. But yeah, tonight I thought I'd read you a couple of short stories. And because we've been enjoying some Sherlock Holmes stories recently, I thought I'd just carry on with that. I will at some point, probably closer to, spooky times, maybe, yeah, closer to October, I think I'll read Hound of the Baskervilles. But Hound of the Baskervilles is absolutely not just the one stream. It's actually quite a long story. So that'll be over multiple streams. So I might do that when Sam's sort of, I don't know, doing more short stories or boy, I don't know, we'll work it out. But yeah, I'd like to read that at some point. But yeah, tonight we've got the Beryl Coronet. For some reason I found it very difficult to roll my R's this evening. That is the text for you, which I shall boop. So we got that, which will probably be, yeah, it's a fairly, as most of these Sherlock Holmes stories are, it's a fairly sort of long short story. So I've got that, and I've got another story afterwards, which may or may not be also sort of murder, it's crime related, because that was the vibe I was going for tonight, apparently. Tab Talk seems to have replaced Cocktail Hour. Oh, no, nothing replaces Cocktail Hour. I just haven't had a good cocktail in a while, actually. I should rectify that. Oh, no, that's a lie. I had some... What did I have? Oh, I made a basil smash last week. That was good. For those of you who are interested, a basil smash is like a fairly healthy handful of basil. Wow, I just put my teeth in. A fairly healthy handful of basil leaves muddled in the bottom of a cocktail shaker. Then it's like 60ml gin, 20ml lemon juice, and like 10ml of simple syrup, sugar syrup, and you shake it all together, and then you strain it into a tumbler with ice in it, and it's really nice and refreshing. It was tasty. Sam tried it and didn't hate it, and Sam is not a massive cocktail person. The basil smash is what that man does to his car in that episode of Fawlty Towers. Yes, that's very true. But yeah, very refreshing. You didn't hate it. There we go. I think those were his exact words. But yeah, I'm always a fan of sort of herb-based cocktails, especially in summer. So stuff with like mint, rosemary, thyme, basil. Basil's nice because it's fun, because you obviously usually associate basil with savoury things, so it's always nice to have. And it's kind of the same with rosemary, I guess, and thyme actually. Yeah, like putting that in a slightly sweeter cocktail is always nice. You haven't had a cocktail for ages, never go to bars anymore. Ah, that's why you learn to make cocktails at home, and then you realise just how expensive it is to have all of the alcohol there. Yeah. Basil and strawberry lemonade is a summer classic. Yes, basil and strawberry is a top tier combination. Homemade. Ooh, nice. Tasty pet. Sorry, words. Got some tasty pear cider. Nice. That sounds good. Lemon basil ice cream. Ooh, that sounds very good. Because lime and basil is also good. But yeah, lemon basil ice cream sounds very good. I'll have to try that at some point. Yeah, mojitos. Yeah, also good. But yeah, and I probably have said before that I think my favourite two summer cocktails are both lime based. One is a Southside, the other is a Gimlet. Both very good cocktails, very simple, very refreshing, very summery. Homemade is good, but you don't keep liquor in the house and you can't drink a whole bottle by yourself in one go. Well, no, true. But that's why you have like various bottles that you get through like over a long period of time. Sort of have the bottle. This is my I don't have a home bar. I'd love a home bar, like just not a big one, but just like a little drinks tray, drinks trolley, drinks cabinet, drinks cupboard. Yeah, that I would stock and like have all the things, have all the basics, and then I could just make myself a cocktail. Be great. If you're ever in London, there's Snowflake. Ooh, okay. Nice. I know where that is. I will have to go there before it gets too cold and have lemon basil ice cream. Okay, nice. But yes. See, now we've talked about cocktails and food, now I'm hungry. Damn it. Your friend used to work there. Oh, neat. Did your friend get free ice cream? That's the important thing. That's what you mean you don't keep around for... Oh, I see. Right, fair enough. That is entirely fair. But, yes. Some of it, nice. Free ice cream, nice. Always good. There's also... There's a lot of good ice cream places in London, actually. I went to a very nice bakery. You know, you got free ice cream when you went to visit her. Nice. Yeah, there was a very nice bakery I went to yesterday, yes, I have lost track of days, in Covent Garden, which is called Chestnut Bakery. So if anyone is ever in London and in the Covent Garden area, would 110% recommend go to Chestnut Bakery. They have so many different kinds of like croissant based pastries. They had one that was like a tiramisu croissant, which was like a round thing with just like croissant pastry around the sides and then just melty tiramisu goodness in the middle. It was very good. Why am I doing this to myself? Now I want that again. Oh dear. Oh well. If we're doing food talk, oh hello. Do I know what we're going to be talking about? Oh yeah, because we haven't done a stream since we went. There used to be a gelateria a block from your favourite coffee shop, and it was amazing. They closed it. I said, no, that's so sad. Like having ice cream and coffee near to each other. Nice. Haven't heard of them, but there's used to be a great ice cream place on Long Acre just off Bow Street. Oh right, I haven't been to Bow Street in ages. It's a little bit out of the way for when I'm in London. But yes, if we're doing food talk, Sam wants me to talk about the place that Sam and I went to, which I don't know if he has posted any pictures of anywhere. I don't know. But it's a chain, but they serve you ice cream shaped like a flower. Oh, that might be Amorino. Amorino ice cream? They do that. I think that might be them. There's quite a lot of those around London now, and they're very, very good. Oh, here we go. Sam is showing everybody where we went. So we went to a place. I'm going to have to start reading at some point soon. Yeah, so we went to two good food places recently. One was near me, and then one we did a little trip to the Wye Valley / Forest of Dean, and went to a place called Under the Nut Tree, which basically just felt like you were going to a very posh person's barbecue. Oh my god, it was so good. yes, we should have some kind of like dedicated food channel, I guess, but like maybe just like recommendations more than just food, because otherwise, as Sam and I were discussing this the other day, and we were saying that like otherwise people who want to like post stuff on Dave's Discord, the John's Discord, and our Discord, that's a heck of a lot of things to be thinking about. It's like, oh, I need to post in several places, so I feel like ours, maybe we should do something like recommendations possibly, or just like, I don't know. But yes, the food was incredible. Yeah, and the worst thing was, we had food, and they served it all like family style. So they would come to your table with a big like bowl of stuff, and then you would serve yourself from said bowls. And the main was like, yeah, don't look at the menu, Sam. Don't do it. You know you're going to be hungry. Yeah, they do also. We've discovered they do also do vegetarian stuff as well, which is good. Yeah, one of the things with the main was like miso cabbage, and there's me thinking it would be like, you know, like shredded cabbage or something. No, they just gave us each basically a quarter of a cabbage. It was enormous, absolutely incredible, and yeah, everything was really, really good. And then they came round with big old like metal. Sam, stop it. Big metal trays full of just more like pork and potatoes, and they're like, "Do you want seconds?" I was like, and Sam physically lost the ability to say no. So yeah. Amarino, yes, yeah, you can walk there blind. Yeah, there's Amarino's great. Yeah, I mean, it was very nice, but you did regret it. And then there was like cheesecake afterwards, which neither of us managed to finish, but it was very good cheesecake, and everything they did was like locally sourced, or they like reared it or grew it or whatever themselves, and it just felt like a big family barbecue. But yeah, it was absolutely delightful, and we could not have chosen a better weekend to go, because it was beautiful weather, like a good cheesecake or strudel, cabin pressure, nice. Yeah, it was like a good temperature, it wasn't too hot, and just the setting is a big bam ba bam. Thanks, Sam. The setting is a big part of the experience, but the food also lived up to it. Yeah, absolutely. Like the vibe is impeccable. It's just so lovely. We're getting popular to be getting bots, I know, right? But yeah, would heartily recommend if anybody ever goes to the Wye Valley for any particular reason. It's in Herefordshire, I think. Is it Herefordshire? I think that was where it was. But yeah, it's a wonderful place. I think it's quite hard to book. I don't quite know how I managed to, because I tried to book in July and they said, we don't have anything until August. So yeah. Also know exactly where to take me for food if I ever end up gigging in Warsaw. Well, I guess I'll have to try and get a gig in Warsaw then, won't I? I would definitely like to go back to Poland, actually, because everybody was really nice. Yeah. I have never been taken such good care of with stuff in the green room, and literally having a meal cooked for us before the concert. Like, yeah, Poland is currently winning on the being taken care of before a concert list. So yeah. Anyway, shall we? Almost half an hour into the stream. Apologies, everybody. I'm not gonna apologise. I'm gonna blame all of you for distracting me. So yes, if we're all sitting comfortably, we shall begin with The Beryl Coronet by Arthur Conan Doyle. "Holmes," said I, as I stood one morning in our bow window looking down the street, "here is a madman coming along. It seems rather sad that his relatives should allow him to come out alone." My friend rose lazily from his armchair and stood with his hands in the pockets of his dressing gown, looking over my shoulder. It was a bright, crisp February morning, and the snow of the day before still lay deep upon the ground, shimmering brightly in the wintry sun. Down the centre of Baker Street it had been ploughed into a brown, crumbly band by the traffic, but at either side and on the heaped-up edges of the footpaths it still lay as white as when it fell. The grey pavement had been cleaned and scraped, but was still dangerously slippery, so that there were fewer passengers than usual. Indeed, from the direction of the Metropolitan Station, no one was coming, save the single gentleman whose eccentric conduct had drawn my attention. He was a man of about 50, tall, portly, and imposing, with a massive, strongly marked face and a commanding figure. He was dressed in a sombre yet rich style, in black frock coat, shining hat, neat brown gaiters, and well-cut pearl-grey trousers. Yet his actions were in absurd contrast to the dignity of his dress and features, for he was running hard, with occasional little springs, such as a weary man gives who is little accustomed to set any tax upon his legs. As he ran, he jerked his hands up and down, waggled his head, and writhed his face into the most extraordinary contortions. "What on earth can be the matter with him?" I asked. "He is looking up at the numbers of the houses." "I believe that he is coming here," said Holmes, rubbing his hands. "Here?" "Yes, I rather think he is coming to consult me professionally. I think that I recognise the symptoms. Ha! Did I not tell you?" As he spoke, the man, puffing and blowing, rushed at our door and pulled at our bell until the whole house resounded with the clanging. A few moments later he was in our room, still puffing, still gesticulating, but with so fixed a look of grief and despair in his eyes that our smiles were turned in an instant to horror and pity. For a while he could not get his words out, but swayed his body and plucked at his hair like one who has been driven to the extreme limits of his reason. Then, suddenly springing to his feet, he beat his head against the wall with such force that we both rushed upon him and tore him away to the centre of the room. Sherlock Holmes pushed him down into the easy-chair and, sitting beside him, patted his hand and chatted with him in the easy, soothing tones which he knew so well how to employ. "You have come to me to tell me your story, have you not?" said he. "You are fatigued with your haste. Pray wait until you have recovered yourself, and then I shall be most happy to look into any little problem which you may submit to me." The man sat for a minute or more with a heaving chest, fighting against his emotion. Then he passed his handkerchief over his brow, set his lips tight, and turned his face towards us. "No doubt you think me mad," said he. "I see that you have had some great trouble," responded Holmes. "God knows I have. A trouble which is enough to unseat my reason, so sudden and so terrible is it. Public disgrace I might have faced, although I am a man whose character has never yet borne a stain. Private affliction also is the lot of every man, but the two coming together, and in so frightful a form, have been enough to shake my very soul. Besides, it is not I alone. The very nobles in the land may suffer, unless some way be found out of this horrible affair." "Pray compose yourself, sir," said Holmes, "and let me have a clear account of who you are and what it is that has befallen you." "My name," answered our visitor, "is probably familiar to your ears. I am Alexander Holder, of the banking firm of Holder and Stevenson, of Threadneedle Street." The name was indeed well known to us, as belonging to the senior partner in the second largest private banking concern in the City of London. What could have happened, then, to bring one of the foremost citizens of London to this most pitiable pass? We waited, all curiosity, until with another effort he braced himself to tell his story. "I feel that time is of value," said he. "That is why I hastened here when the police inspector suggested that I should secure your cooperation. I came to Baker Street by the Underground,
and hurried from there on foot, for the cabs go slowly through this snow. That is why I was so out of breath. Excuse me, for I am a man who takes very little exercise. I feel better now, and I will put the facts before you as shortly and yet as clearly as I can. It is, of course, well known to you that in a successful banking business as much depends upon our being able to find remunerative investments for our funds as upon our increasing our connection and the number of our depositors. One of our most lucrative means of laying out money is in the shape of loans, where the security is unimpeachable. We have done a good deal in this direction during the last few years, and there are many noble families to whom we have advanced large sums upon the security of their pictures, libraries, or plate. Yesterday morning I was seated in my office at the bank, when a card was brought in to me by one of the clerks. I started when I saw the name, for it was that of none other than... well, perhaps even to you I had better say no more than it was a name which is a household word all over the earth, one of the highest, noblest, most exalted names in England. I was overwhelmed by the honour, and attempted, when he entered, to say so, but he plunged at once into business with the air of a man who wishes to hurry quickly through a disagreeable task. "Mr. Holder," said he, "I have been informed that you are in the habit of advancing money." "The firm do so when the security is good," I answered. "It is absolutely essential to me," said he, "that I should have £50,000 at once. I could, of course, borrow so trifling a sum 10 times over from my friends, but I much prefer to make it a matter of business, and to carry out that business myself. In my position you can readily understand that it is unwise to place oneself under obligations." "For how long, may I ask, do you want this sum?" I asked. "Next Monday I have a large sum due to me, and I shall then most certainly repay what you advance, with whatever interest you think it right to charge. But it is very essential to me that the money should be paid at once." "I should be happy to advance it without further parley from my own private purse," said I, "were it not that the strain would be rather more than it could bear. If, on the other hand, I am to do it in the name of the firm, then in justice to my partner I must insist that, even in your case, every business-like precaution should be taken." "I should much prefer to have it so," said he, raising up a square black morocco case which he had laid beside his chair. "You have doubtless heard of the Beryl Coronet." "One of the most precious public possessions of the Empire," said I. "Precisely." He opened the case, and there, embedded in soft flesh-coloured velvet, lay the magnificent piece of jewellery which he had named. "There are 39 enormous beryls," said he, "and the price of the gold chasing is incalculable. The lowest estimate would put the worth of the coronet at double the sum which I have asked. I am prepared to leave it with you as my security." I took the precious case into my hands and looked in some perplexity from it to my illustrious client. "You doubt its value?" he asked. "Not at all. I only doubt—" "The propriety of my leaving it. You may set your mind at rest about that. I should not dream of doing so were it not absolutely certain that I should be able in 4 days to reclaim it. It is a pure matter of form. Is the security sufficient?" "Ample." "You understand, Mr. Holder, that I am giving you a strong proof of the confidence which I have in you, founded upon all that I have heard of you. I rely upon you not only to be discreet and to refrain from all gossip upon the matter, but above all to preserve this coronet with every possible precaution, because I need not say that a great public scandal would be caused if any harm were to befall it. Any injury to it would be almost as serious as its complete loss, for there are no Beryls in the world to match these, and it would be impossible to replace them. I leave it with you, however, with every confidence, and I shall call for it in person on Monday morning." Seeing that my client was anxious to leave, I said no more, but calling for my cashier, I ordered him to pay over £50,000 notes. When I was alone once more, however, with the precious case lying upon the table in front of me, I could not but think with some misgivings of the immense responsibility which it entailed upon me. There could be no doubt that, as it was a national possession, a horrible scandal would ensue if any misfortune should occur to it. I already regretted having ever consented to take charge of it. However, it was too late to alter the matter now, so I locked it up in my private safe and turned once more to my work. When evening came, I felt that it would be an imprudence to leave so precious a thing in the office behind me. Bankers' safes had been forced before now, and why should not mine be? If so, how terrible would be the position in which I should find myself. I determined, therefore, that for the next few days I would always carry the case backward and forward with me, so that it might never be really out of my reach. With this intention, I called a cab and drove out to my house at Streatham, carrying the jewel with me. I did not breathe freely until I had taken it upstairs and locked it in the bureau of my dressing-room. And now a word as to my household, Mr. Holmes, for I wish you to thoroughly understand the situation. My groom and my page sleep out of the house, and may be set aside altogether. I have 3 maidservants who have been with me a number of years, and whose absolute reliability is quite above suspicion. Another, Lucy Parr, the second waiting-maid, has only been in my service a few months. She came with an excellent character, however, and has always given me satisfaction. She is a very pretty girl, and has attracted admirers who have occasionally hung around about the place. That is the only drawback which we have found to her, but we believe her to be a thoroughly good girl in every way. So much for the servants. My family itself is so small that it will not take me long to describe it. I am a widower, and have an only son, Arthur. He has been a disappointment to me, Mr. Holmes, a grievous disappointment. I have no doubt that I am myself to blame. People tell me that I have spoiled him. Very likely I have. When my dear wife died, I felt that he was all I had to love. I could not bear to see the smile fade even for a moment from his face. I have never denied him a wish. Perhaps it would have been better for both of us had I been sterner, but I meant it for the best. It was naturally my intention that he should succeed me in my business, but he was not of a business turn. He was wild, wayward, and, to speak the truth, I could not trust him in the handling of large sums of money. When he was young, he became a member of an aristocratic club, and there, having charming manners, he was soon the intimate of a number of men with long purses and expensive habits. He learned to play heavily at cards, and to squander money on the turf, until he had again and again to come to me and implore me to give him an advance upon his allowance, that he might settle his debts of honour. He tried more than once to break away from the dangerous company which he was keeping, but each time the influence of his friend Sir George Burnwell was enough to draw him back again. And, indeed, I could not wonder that such a man as Sir George Burnwell should gain an influence over him, for he has frequently brought him to my house, and I have found myself that I could hardly resist the fascination of his manner. He is older than Arthur, a man of the world to his fingertips, one who had been everywhere, seen everything, a brilliant talker, and a man of great personal beauty. Yet, when I think of him in cold blood, far away from the glamour of his presence, I am convinced, from his cynical speech and the look which I have caught in his eyes, that he is one who should be deeply distrusted. So I think, and so too thinks my little Mary, who has a woman's quick insight into character. And now there is only she to be described. She is my niece, but when my brother died 5 years ago and left her alone in the world, I adopted her, and have looked upon her ever since as my daughter. She is a sunbeam in my house, sweet, loving, beautiful, a wonderful manager and housekeeper, yet as tender and quiet and gentle as a woman could be. She is my right hand. I do not know what I could do without her. In only one manner has she ever gone against my wishes. Twice my boy has asked her to marry him, for he loves her devotedly, but each time she has refused him. I think that if anyone could have drawn him into the right path, it would have been she, and that his marriage might have changed his whole life. But now, alas, it is too late, forever too late. Now, Mr. Holmes, you know the people who live under my roof, and I shall continue with my miserable story. When we were taking coffee in the drawing-room that night, after dinner, I told Arthur and Mary my experience, and of the precious treasure which we had under our roof, suppressing only the name of my client. Lucy Parr, who had brought in the coffee, had, I am sure, left the room, but I cannot swear that the door was closed. Mary and Arthur were much interested, and wished to see the famous coronet, but I thought it better not to disturb it. "Where have you put it?" asked Arthur. "In my own bureau." "Well, I hope to goodness the house won't be burgled during the night," said he. "It is locked up," I answered. "Oh, any old key will fit that bureau. When I was a youngster, I have opened it myself with the key of the box-room cupboard." He often had a wild way of talking, so that I thought little of what he said. He followed me to my room, however, that night with a very grave face. "Look here, Dad," said he, with his eyes cast down. "Can you let me have £200? "No, I cannot," I answered sharply. "I have been far too generous with you in money matters." "You have been very kind," said he, "but I must have this money, or else I can never show my face inside the club again." "And a very good thing, too," I cried. "Yes, but you would not have me leave it a dishonoured man," said he. "I could not bear the disgrace. I must raise the money in some way, and if you will not let me have it, then I must try other means." I was very angry, for this was the third demand during the month. "You shall not have a farthing from me," I cried, on which he bowed and left the room without another word. When he was gone, I unlocked my bureau, made sure that my treasure was safe, and locked it again. Then I started to go round the house to see that all was secure, a duty which I usually leave to Mary, but which I thought it well to perform myself that night. As I came down the stairs, I saw Mary herself at the side window of the hall, which she closed and fastened as I approached. "Tell me, Dad," said she, looking, I thought, a little disturbed, "did you give Lucy the maid leave to go out tonight?" "Certainly not." "She came in just now by the back door. I have no doubt that she has only been to the side gate to see someone, but I think that is hardly safe and should be stopped. You must speak to her in the morning, or I will if you prefer it. Are you sure that everything is fastened?" "Quite sure, Dad." "Then good night." I kissed her and went up to my bedroom, where I was soon asleep. I am endeavouring to tell you everything, Mr. Holmes, which may have any bearing upon the case, but I beg that you will question me upon any point which I do not make clear.
On the contrary, your statement is singularly lucid.
I come to a part of my story now in which I should wish to be particularly so. I am not a very heavy sleeper, and the anxiety in my mind tended, no doubt, to make me even less so than usual. About 2 a.m, then, I was awakened by some sound in the house. It had ceased ere I was wide awake, but it had left an impression behind it as though a window had gently closed somewhere. I lay listening with all my ears. Suddenly, to my horror, there was a distinct sound of footsteps moving softly in the next room. I slipped out of bed, all palpitating with fear, and peeped round the corner of my dressing-room door. "Arthur!" I screamed. "You villain! You thief! How dare you touch that coronet?" The gas was half up, as I had left it, and my unhappy boy, dressed only in his shirt and trousers, was standing beside the light, holding the coronet in his hands. He appeared to be wrenching at it, or bending it with all his strength. At my cry, he dropped it from his grasp, and turned as pale as death. I snatched it up and examined it. One of the gold corners, with 3 of the Beryls in it, was missing. "You blackguard!" I shouted, beside myself with rage. "You have destroyed it! You have dishonoured me forever! Where are the jewels which you have stolen?" "Stolen?" he cried. "Yes, you thief!" I roared, shaking him by the shoulder. "There are none missing. There cannot be any missing," said he. "There are 3 missing, and you know where they are. Must I call you a liar as well as a thief? Did I not see you trying to tear off another piece?" "You have called me names enough," said he. "I will not stand it any longer. I shall not say another word about this business since you have chosen to insult me. I will leave your house in the morning and make my own way in the world." "You shall leave it in the hands of the police," I cried, half mad with grief and rage. "I shall have this matter probed to the bottom." "You shall learn nothing from me," said he, with a passion such as I should not have thought it was in his nature. "If you choose to call the police, let them find what they can." By this time the whole house was astir, for I had raised my voice in my anger. Mary was the first to rush into my room, and at the sight of the coronet and of Arthur's face, she read the whole story, and, with a scream, fell down senseless on the ground. I sent the housemaid for the police, and put the investigation into their hands at once. When the inspector and a constable entered the house, Arthur, who had stood sullenly with his arms folded, asked me whether it was my intention to charge him with theft. I answered that it had ceased to be a private matter, but had become a public one, since the ruined coronet was national property. I was determined that the law should have its way in everything. "At least," said he, "you will not have me arrested at once. It would be to your advantage as well as mine if I might leave the house for 5 minutes." "That you may get away, or perhaps that you may conceal what you have stolen?" said I. And then, realizing the dreadful position in which I was placed, I implored him to remember that not only my honour, but that of one who was far greater than I, was at stake, and that he threatened to raise a scandal which would convulse the nation. He might avert it all if he would but tell me what he had done with the 3 missing stones. "You may as well face the matter," said I. "You have been caught in the act, and no confession could make your guilt more heinous. If you but make such reparation as is in your power by telling us where the Beryls are, all shall be forgiven and forgotten." "Keep your forgiveness for those who ask for it," he answered, turning away from me with a sneer. I saw that he was too hardened for any words of mine to influence him. There was but one way for it. I called in the inspector and gave him into custody. A search was made at once, not only of his person, but of his room and of every portion of the house where he could possibly have concealed the gems, but no trace of them could be found, nor would the wretched boy open his mouth for all our persuasions and our threats. This morning he was removed to a cell, and I, after going through all the police formalities, have hurried round to you, to implore you to use your skill in unravelling the matter. The police have openly confessed that they can at present make nothing of it. You may go to any expense which you think necessary. I have already offered a reward of £1,000. My God, what shall I do? I have lost my honour, my gems, and my son in one night. Oh, what shall I do?" He put a hand on either side of his head and rocked himself to and fro, droning to himself like a child whose grief has got beyond words. Sherlock Holmes sat silent for some few minutes, with his brows knitted and his eyes fixed upon the fire. "Do you receive much company?" he asked. "None, save my partner with his family, and an occasional friend of Arthur's. Sir George Burnwell has been several times lately. No one else, I think." "Do you go out much in society?" "Arthur does. Mary and I stay at home. We neither of us care for it."
"That is unusual in a young girl."
"She is of a quiet nature. Besides, she is not so very young. She is 24.
"This matter, from what you say, seems to have been a shock to her also."
"Terrible. She is even more affected than I."
"You have neither of you any doubt as to your son's guilt?"
"How can we have, when I saw him with my own eyes with the coronet in his hands?"
"I hardly consider that a conclusive proof. Was the remainder of the coronet at all injured?"
"Yes, it was twisted."
"Do you not think, then, that he might have been trying to straighten it?"
"God bless you. You are doing what you can for him and for me, but it is too heavy a task. What was he doing there at all? If his purpose were innocent, why did he not say so?"
"Precisely. And if it were guilty, why did he not invent a lie? His silence appears to me to cut both ways. There are several singular points about the case. What did the police think of the noise which awoke you from your sleep?"
"They considered that it might be caused by Arthur's closing his bedroom door."
"A likely story. As if a man bent on felony would slam his door so as to wake a household. What did they say, then, of the disappearance of these gems?"
"They are still sounding the planking and probing the furniture in the hope of finding them."
"Have they thought of looking outside the house?"
"Yes, they have shown extraordinary energy. The whole garden has already been minutely examined."
"Now, my dear sir," said Holmes, "is it not obvious to you now that this matter really strikes very much deeper than either you or the police were at first inclined to think? It appeared to you to be a simple case. To me it seems exceedingly complex. Consider what is involved by your theory. You suppose that your own son came down from his bed, went at great risk to your dressing room, opened your bureau, took out your coronet, broke off by main force a small portion of it, went off to some other place, concealed 3 gems out of the 39 with such skill that nobody can find them, and then returned with the other 36 into the room in which he exposed himself to the greatest danger of being discovered. I ask you now, is such a theory tenable?"
"But what other is there?" cried the banker with a gesture of despair. "If his motives were innocent, why does he not explain them?"
"It is our task to find out," replied Holmes. "So now, if you please, Mr. Holder, we will set off for Streatham together, and devote an hour to glancing a little more closely into details." My friend insisted upon my accompanying them in their expedition, which I was eager enough to do, for my curiosity and sympathy were deeply stirred by the story to which we had listened. I confess that the guilt of the banker's son appeared to me to be as obvious as it did to his unhappy father, but still I had such faith in Holmes's judgment that I felt that there must be some grounds for hope, as long as he was dissatisfied with the accepted explanation. He hardly spoke a word the whole way out to the southern suburb, but sat with his chin upon his breast and his hat drawn over his eyes, sunk in the deepest thought. Our client appeared to have taken fresh heart at the little glimpse of hope which had been presented to him, and he even broke into a desultory chat with me over his business affairs. A short railway journey and a shorter walk brought us to Fairbank, the modest residence of the great financier.
Fairbank was a good-sized square house of white stone, standing back a little from the road. A double carriage sweep with a snow-clad lawn stretched down in front to the two large iron gates which closed the entrance. On the right side was a small wooden thicket which led into a narrow path between two neat hedges stretching from the road to the kitchen door and forming the tradesman's entrance. On the left ran a lane which led to the stables, and was not itself within the grounds at all, being a public, though little used, thoroughfare. Holmes left us standing at the door, and walked slowly all round the house, across the front, down the tradesman's path, and so round by the garden behind into the stable lane. So long was he that Mr. Holder and I went into the dining-room and waited by the fire until he should return. We were sitting there in silence when the door opened and a young lady came in. She was rather above the middle height, slim, with dark hair and eyes, which seemed the darker against the absolute pallor of her skin. I do not think that I have ever seen such deadly paleness in a woman's face. Her lips, too, were bloodless, but her eyes were flushed with crying. As she swept silently into the room, she impressed me with a greater sense of her grief than the banker had done in the morning, and it was the more striking in her as she was evidently a woman of strong character, with immense capacity for self-restraint. Disregarding my presence, she went straight to her uncle, and passed her hand over his head with a sweet womanly caress. "You have given orders that Arthur should be liberated, have you not, Dad?" she asked. No, my girl. The matter must be probed to the bottom." "But I am so sure that he is innocent. You know what woman's instincts are. I know that he has done no harm, and that you will be sorry for having acted so harshly." "Why is he silent, then, if he is innocent?" "Who knows? Perhaps because he was so angry that you should suspect him." "How could I help suspecting him when I actually saw him with the coronet in his hand?" "Oh, but he had only picked it up to look at it. Oh, do take my word for it that he is innocent. Let the matter drop, and say no more. It is so dreadful to think of our dear Arthur in prison." "I shall never let it drop until the gems are found. Never, Mary. Your affection for Arthur blinds you as to the awful consequences to me. Far from hushing the thing up, I have brought a gentleman down from London to inquire more deeply into it." "This gentleman?" she asked, facing round to me. "No, his friend. He wished us to leave him alone. He is round the stable in the stable lane now." "The stable lane?" She raised her dark eyebrows. "What can he hope to find there?" "Ah, this, I suppose, is he." "I trust, sir, that you will succeed in proving what I feel sure is the truth, that my cousin Arthur is innocent of this crime." "I fully share your opinion, and I trust with you that we may prove it," returned Holmes, going back to the mat to knock the snow from his shoes. "I believe I have the honour of addressing Miss Mary Holder. Might I ask you a question or two?" "Pray do, sir, if it may help to clear this horrible affair up." "You heard nothing yourself last night?" "Nothing until my uncle here began to speak loudly. I heard that and I came down." "You shut up the windows and doors the night before. Did you fasten all the windows?" "Yes." "Were they all fastened this morning?" "Yes." "You have a maid who has a sweetheart? I think that you remarked to your uncle last night that she had been out to see him." "Yes, and she was the girl who waited in the drawing-room, and who may have heard uncle's remarks about the coronet." "I see. You infer that she may have gone out to tell her sweetheart, and that the two may have planned the robbery." "But what is the good of all these vague theories?" cried the banker impatiently. when I have told you that I saw Arthur with the coronet in his hands?"
"Wait a little, Mr. Holder. We must come back to that. About this girl, Miss Holder. You saw her return by the kitchen door, I presume?"
"Yes, when I went to see if the door was fastened for the night, I met her slipping in. I saw the man, too, in the gloom."
"Do you know him?"
"Oh, yes, he is the greengrocer who brings our vegetables round. His name is Francis Prosper."
"He stood," said Holmes, "to the left of the door, that is to say, farther up the path than is necessary to reach the door."
"Yes, he did."
"And he is a man with a wooden leg?"
Something like fear sprang up in the young lady's expressive black eyes. "Why, you are like a magician," said she. "How do you know that?"
She smiled, but there was no answering smile in Holmes's thin, eager face. "I should be very glad now to go upstairs," said he. "I shall probably wish to go over the outside of the house again. Perhaps I had better take a look at the lower windows before I go up."
He walked swiftly round from one to the other, pausing only at the large one which looked from the hall onto the stable lane. This he opened, and made a very careful examination of the sill with his powerful magnifying lens.
"Now we shall go upstairs," said he at last.
The banker's dressing-room was a plainly furnished little chamber with a grey carpet, a large bureau, and a long mirror. Holmes went to the bureau first, and looked hard at the lock.
"Which key was used to open it?" he asked.
"That which my son himself indicated, that of the cupboard of the lumber room."
"Have you it here?"
"That is it on the dressing-table."
Sherlock Holmes took it up and opened the bureau. "It is a noiseless lock," said he. "It is no wonder that it did not wake you. This case, I presume, contains the coronet. We must have a look at it."
He opened the case, and taking out the diadem, he laid it upon the table. It was a magnificent specimen of the jeweller's art, and the 36 stones were the finest that I have ever seen. At one side of the coronet was a crooked, cracked edge, where a corner holding 3 gems had been torn away.
"Now, Mr. Holder," said Holmes, "here is the corner which corresponds to that which has been so unfortunately lost. Might I beg that you will break it off?"
The banker recoiled in horror. "I should not dream of trying," said he.
"Then I will."
Holmes suddenly bent his strength upon it, but without result.
"I feel it give a little," said he, "but though I am exceptionally strong in the fingers, it would take me all my time to break it. An ordinary man could not do it. Now, what do you think would happen if I did break it, Mr. Holder? There would be a noise like a pistol shot. Do you tell me that all this happened within a few yards of your bed, and that you heard nothing of it?"
"I do not know what to think. It is all dark to me."
"But perhaps it may grow lighter as we go. What do you think, Miss Holder?"
I confess that I still share my uncle's perplexity.
"Your son had no shoes or slippers on when you saw him?"
"He had nothing on save only his trousers and shirt."
"Thank you. We have certainly been favoured with extraordinary luck during this inquiry, and it will be entirely our own fault if we do not succeed in clearing the matter up. With your permission, Mr. Holder, I shall now continue my investigations outside."
He went alone at his own request, for he explained that any unnecessary footmarks might make his task more difficult. For an hour or more he was at work, returning at last with his feet heavy with snow and his features as inscrutable as ever.
"I think that I have seen now all that there is to see, Mr. Holder," said he. "I can serve you best by returning to my rooms."
But the gems, Mr. Holmes, where are they?
I cannot tell.
The banker wrung his hands. I shall never see them again, he cried. And my son? You give me hopes?
My opinion is in no way altered.
Then for God's sake, what was this dark business which was acted in my house last night?
If you can call upon me at my Baker Street rooms tomorrow morning between 9 and 10, I shall be happy to do what I can to make it clearer. I understand that you give me carte blanche to act for you, provided only that I get back the gems, and that you place no limit on the sum I may draw.
I would give my fortune to have them back.
Very good. I shall look into the matter between this and then. Goodbye. It is just possible that I may have to come over here again before evening. It was obvious to me that my companion's mind was now made up about the case, although what his conclusions were was more than I could even dimly imagine. Several times during our homeward journey I endeavoured to sound him upon the point, but he always glided away to some other topic, until at last I gave it over in despair. It was not yet 3 when we found ourselves in our rooms once more. He hurried to his chamber, and was down again in a few minutes, dressed as a common loafer. With his collar turned up, his shiny seedy coat, his red cravat, and his worn boots, he was a perfect sample of the class. "I think that this should do," said he, glancing into the glass above the fireplace. "I only wish that you could come with me, Watson, but I fear that it won't do. I may be on the trail in this matter, or I may be following a will-o'-the-wisp, but I shall soon know which it is. I hope that I may be back in a few hours." He cut a slice of beef from the joint upon the sideboard, sandwiched it between 2 rounds of bread, and, thrusting this rude meal into his pocket, he started off upon his expedition. I had just finished my tea when he returned, evidently in excellent spirits, swinging an old elastic-sided boot in his hand. He chucked it down into a corner and helped himself to a cup of tea. "I only looked in as I passed," said he. "I'm going right on." "Where to?" "Oh, to the other side of the West End. It may be some time before I get back. Don't wait up for me in case I should be late." "How are you getting on?" "Oh, so-so. Nothing to complain of. I have been out to Streatham since I saw you last, but I did not call at the house. It is a very sweet little problem, and I would not have missed it for a good deal. However, I must not sit gossiping here, but must get these disreputable clothes off and return to my highly respectable self." I could see by his manner that he had stronger reasons for satisfaction than his words alone would imply. His eyes twinkled, and there was even a touch of colour upon his sallow cheeks. He hastened upstairs, and a few minutes later I heard the slam of the hall door, which told me that he was off once more upon his congenial hunt. I waited until midnight, but there was no sign of his return, so I retired to my room. It was no uncommon thing for him to be away for days and nights on end when he was hot upon a scent, so that his lateness caused me no surprise. I do not know at what hour he came in, but when I came down to breakfast in the morning, there he was, with a cup of coffee in one hand and the paper in the other, as fresh and trim as possible. "You will excuse my beginning without you, Watson," said he, "but you remember that our client has rather an early appointment this morning." "Why, it is after 9 now," I answered. "I should not be surprised if that were he. I thought I heard a ring." It was indeed our friend the financier. I was shocked by the change which had come over him, for his face, which was naturally of a broad and massive mould, was now pinched and fallen in, while his hair seemed to be at least a shade whiter. He entered with a weariness and lethargy which was even more painful than his violence of the morning before, and he dropped heavily into the armchair which I pushed forward for him.
do not know what I have done to be so severely tried," said he. "Only 2 days ago I was a happy and prosperous man, without a care in the world. Now I am left to a lonely and dishonoured age. One sorrow comes close upon the heels of another. My niece Mary has deserted me."
"Deserted you?"
"Yes. Her bed this morning had not been slept in. Her room was empty, and a note lay for me upon the hall table. I had said to her last night, in sorrow and not in anger, that if she had married my boy, all might have been well with him. Perhaps it was thoughtless of me to say so. It is to that remark that she refers in this note. My dearest uncle, I feel that I have brought this trouble upon you, and that if I had acted differently this terrible misfortune might never have occurred. I cannot, with this thought in my mind, ever again be happy under your roof, and I feel that I must leave you forever. Do not worry about my future, for that is provided for, and above all, do not search for me, for it will be fruitless labour, and an ill service to me. In life or in death, I am ever your loving Mary." What could she mean by that note, Mr. Holmes? Do you think it points to suicide?
No, nothing of the kind. It is perhaps the best possible solution. I trust, Mr. Holder, that you are nearing the end of your troubles.
Ah, you say so? You have heard something, Mr. Holmes? You have learned something? Where are the gems?
You would not think £1,000 apiece an excessive sum for them?
I would pay 10.
That would be unnecessary. 3,000 will cover the matter. And there is a little reward, I fancy. Have you your cheque-book? Here is a pen. Better make it out for £4,000.
With a dazed face, the banker made out the required cheque. Holmes walked over to his desk, took out a little triangular piece of gold with 3 gems in it, and threw it down upon the table. With a shriek of joy, our client clutched it up. "You have it!" he gasped. "I am saved! I am saved!" The reaction of joy was as passionate as his grief had been, and he hugged his recovered gems to his bosom.
"There is one other thing you owe, Mr. Holder," said Sherlock Holmes rather sternly.
"Oh?" He caught up a pen. "Name the sum and I will pay it."
"No, the debt is not to me. You owe a very humble apology to that noble lad, your son, who has carried himself in this matter as I should be proud to see my own son do, should I ever chance to have one."
"Then it was not Arthur who took them?"
"I told you yesterday, and I repeat today, that it was not."
"You are sure of it? Then let us hurry to him at once to let him know that the truth is known."
"He knows it already. When I had cleared it all up, I had an interview with him, and finding that he would not tell me the story, I told it to him, on which he had to confess that I was right, and to add the very few details which were not yet quite clear to me. Your news of this morning, however, may open his lips."
"For heaven's sake, tell me then, what is this extraordinary mystery?"
"I will do so, and I will show you the steps by which I reached it. And let me say to you first what is hardest for me to say and for you to hear. There has been an understanding between Sir George Burnwell and your niece, Mary. They have now fled together."
"My Mary? Impossible!"
"It is unfortunately more than possible. It is certain. Neither you nor your son knew the true character of this man when you admitted him into your family circle. He is one of the most dangerous men in England, a ruined gambler, an absolutely desperate villain, a man without heart or conscience. Your niece knew nothing of such men. When he breathed his vows to her, as he had done to 100 before her, she flattered herself that she alone had touched his heart.
The devil knows best what he said, but at least she became his tool, and was in the habit of seeing him nearly every evening. I cannot, and I will not believe it, cried the banker with an ashen face. I will tell you then what occurred in your house that night. Your niece, when you had, as she thought, gone to your room, slipped down and talked to her lover through the window which leads into the stable lane. His footmarks had pressed right through the snow, so long he had stood there. She told him of the coronet. His wicked lust for gold kindled at the news, and he bent her to his will. I have no doubt that she loved you, but there are women in whom the love of a lover extinguishes all other loves, and I think that she must have been one. She had hardly listened to his instructions when she saw you coming downstairs, on which she closed the window rapidly, and told you about one of the servants' escapade with her wooden-legged lover, which was all perfectly true. Your boy, Arthur, went to bed after his interview with you, but he slept badly on account of his uneasiness about his club debts. In the middle of the night he heard a soft tread pass his door, so he rose, and looking out was surprised to see his cousin walking very stealthily along the passage until she disappeared into your dressing room. Petrified with astonishment, the lad slipped on some clothes and waited there in the dark to see what would come of this strange affair. Presently she emerged from the room again, and in the light of the passage lamp your son saw that she carried the precious coronet in her hands. She passed down the stairs, and he, thrilling with horror, ran along and slipped behind the curtain near your door, whence he could see what passed in the hall beneath. He saw her stealthily open the window, hand out the coronet to someone in the gloom, and then, closing it once more, hurry back to her room, passing quite close to where he stood, hid behind the curtain. As long as she was on the scene, he could not take any action without a horrible exposure of the woman whom he loved. But the instant she was gone, he realized how crushing a misfortune this would be for you, and how all-important it was to set it right. He rushed down, just as he was, in his bare feet, opened the window, sprang out into the snow, and ran down the lane, where he could see a dark figure in the moonlight. Sir George Burnwell tried to get away, but Arthur caught him, and there was a struggle between them, your lad tugging at one side of the coronet, and his opponent at the other. In the scuffle, your son struck Sir George, and cut him over the eye. Then something suddenly snapped, and your son, finding that he had the coronet in his hands, rushed back, closed the window, ascended to your room, and had just observed that the coronet had been twisted in the struggle, and was endeavouring to straighten it, when you appeared upon the scene. "Is it possible?" gasped the banker. You then roused his anger by calling him names at a moment when he felt that he had deserved your warmest thanks. He could not explain the true state of affairs without betraying the one who certainly deserved little enough consideration at his hands. He took the more chivalrous view, however, and preserved her secret. "And that was why she shrieked and fainted when she saw the coronet," cried Mr. Holder. "Oh, my God, what a blind fool I have been! And his asking to be allowed to go out for 5 minutes. The dear fellow wanted to see if the missing piece were at the scene of the struggle. How cruelly I have misjudged him!" "When I arrived at the house," continued Holmes, I at once went very carefully round it to observe if there were any traces in the snow which might help me. I knew that none had fallen since the evening before, and also that there had been a strong frost to preserve impressions. I passed along the tradesman's path, but found it all trampled down and indistinguishable. Just beyond it, however, at the far side of the kitchen door, a woman had stood and talked with a man, whose round impression on one side showed that he had a wooden leg. I could even tell that they had been disturbed, for the woman had run back swiftly to the door, as was shown by the deep toe and light heel marks, while wooden leg had waited a little, and then had gone away.
I thought at the time that this might be the maid and her sweetheart, of whom you had already spoken to me, and inquiry showed it was so. I passed round the garden without seeing anything more than random tracks, which I took to be the police. But when I got into the stable lane, a very long and complex story was written in the snow in front of me. There was a double line of tracks of a booted man, and a second double line which I saw with delight belonged to a man with naked feet. I was at once convinced from what you had told me that the latter was your son. The first had walked both ways, but the other had run swiftly, and as his tread was marked in places over the depression of the boot, it was obvious that he had passed after the other. I followed them up, and found that they led to the hall window, where Boots had worn all the snow away while waiting. Then I walked to the other end, which was 100 yards or more down the lane. I saw where Boots had faced round, where the snow was cut up, as though there had been a struggle, and finally where a few drops of blood had fallen, to show me that I was not mistaken. Boots had then run down the lane, and another little smudge of blood showed that it was he who had been hurt. When he came to the high road at the other end, I found that the pavement had been cleared, so there was an end to that clue. On entering the house, however, I examined, as you remember, the sill and framework of the hall window with my lens, and I could at once see that someone had passed out. I could distinguish the outline of an instep where the wet foot had been placed in coming in. I was then beginning to be able to form an opinion as to what had occurred. A man had waited outside the window. Someone had brought him the gems. The deed had been overseen by your son. He had pursued the thief, had struggled with him. They had each tugged at the coronet, their united strength causing injuries which neither alone could have effected. He had returned with the prize, but had left a fragment in the grasp of his opponent. So far I was clear. The question now was, who was the man, and who was it brought him the coronet? It is an old maxim of mine that when you have excluded the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. Now, I knew that it was not you who had brought it down, so there only remained your niece and the maids. But if it were the maids, why should your son allow himself to be accused in their place? There could be no possible reason. As he loved his cousin, however, there was an excellent explanation why he should retain her secret, the more so as the secret was a disgraceful one. When I remembered that you had seen her at that window, and how she had fainted on seeing the coronet again, my conjecture became a certainty. And who could it be who was her confederate? A lover, evidently, for who else could outweigh the love and gratitude which she must feel to you? I knew that you went out little, and that your circle of friends was a very limited one, but among them was Sir George Burnwell. I had heard of him before as being a man of evil reputation among women. It must have been he who wore those boots and retained the missing gems. Even though he knew that Arthur had discovered him, he might still flatter himself that he was safe, for the lad could not say a word without compromising his own family. Well, your own good sense will suggest what measures I took next. I went in the shape of a loafer to Sir George's house, managed to pick up an acquaintance with his valet, learned that his master had cut his head the night before, and finally, at the expense of 6 shillings, made all sure by buying a pair of his cast-off shoes. With these I journeyed down to Streatham, and saw that they exactly fitted the tracks. "I saw an ill-dressed vagabond in the lane yesterday evening," said Mr. Holder. "Precisely. It was I. I found that I had my man, so I came home and changed my clothes. It was a delicate part which I had to play then, for I saw that a prosecution must be avoided to avert scandal,
and I knew that so astute a villain would see that our hands were tied in the matter. I went and saw him. At first, of course, he denied everything. But when I gave him every particular that had occurred, he tried to bluster and took down a life-preserver from the wall. I knew my man, however, and I clapped a pistol to his head before he could strike. Then he became a little more reasonable. I told him that we would give him a price for the stones he held, £1,000 apiece. That brought out the first signs of grief he had shown. "Why, dash it all," said he, "I've let them go at 600 for the 3. I soon managed to get the address of the receiver who had them, on promising him that there would be no prosecution. Off I set to him, and after much chaffering I got our stones at 1,000 apiece. Then I looked in upon your son, told him that all was all right, and eventually got to my bed about 2 o'clock, after what I may call a really hard day's work." "A day which has saved England from a great public scandal," said the banker, rising. "Sir, I cannot find words to thank you. But you shall not find me ungrateful for what you have done. Your skill has indeed exceeded all that I have ever heard of it. And now I must fly to my dear boy to apologize to him for the wrong which I have done him. As to what you tell me of poor Mary, it goes to my heart. Not even your skill can inform me where she is now." "I think that we may safely say," returned Holmes, "that she is wherever Sir George Burnwell is. It is equally certain, too, that whatever her sins are, they will soon receive a more than sufficient punishment." The end. Thank you for listening. Yes, I'm not sure that necessarily Mary will receive a more than sufficient punishment. Like, I feel like she doesn't actually need to be punished that badly, but okay, sure. Was a bit of an ominous sounding ending, wasn't it? Yeah. Eek. I kind of hope that she's okay, because, you know, not everybody can choose wisely all the time. But yes, and she is, after all, 24, not very old. Even though the opinions of the time would have you believe otherwise. But yes. Ancient! I know, right? Also, hi Diana. Lovely to see you here. Hope you're well. And yeah, exactly. She was essentially groomed by a repeat offender. Yeah, exactly. It's not really like much. Yeah, she doesn't deserve bad things, basically. But maybe she should have a bit more of a moral compass. I don't know. But she was probably pressured quite a lot into that, so it's not really her fault. But anyway, we shall take a break and come back in about 5 minutes. I will see how my voice feels. It feels a bit at the moment, but yes. Go do break-related things, and we shall see you back in about 5 minutes. Bye for now.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope we have had a good break and done break-related things and hydrated and done all the stuff. I spent the break with my head out of a window trying to work out what this weird noise is I keep hearing. And it sounds like a, you know, like an old pub sign or something, just that kind of thing. So it's obviously something that's like being swung or something by the wind, but I have no idea what it could be. So it's slightly disconcerting. Cat? It doesn't sound like a cat. It definitely sounds like Rusty Weathervane. Unfortunately, don't think there are many of those around here. Impression of it sounded like a cat. Well, raspberries. Yeah, no, it's definitely not a cat. It sounds there's kind of like almost like a rusty element to it, I guess. But like, I don't know what it could be. I'm not even sure where it's coming from. It's just like across the road, where there are nothing but trees. Oh, it might be a tree branch. Aha, that's what it might be. Loose shed door. Also possible, but that's I think I know what that sounds like because. Yes. Yeah, I have a sneaky suspicion now talking it through. Famous rusty tree. All right. Well, trees make weird noises, right? Yeah, no, I think it might possibly be like a tree branch rubbing against something. Maybe. Or it's a rusty weathervane that has somehow gained sentience and like walked all the way down from the church in my village to here. Maybe. The power line to your house runs through a tree in the backyard. Protector thing on it, and it squeaks in the wind. Yeah, that's basically exactly what we've got here. So it might be that. Ghost. Yeah, definitely ghost. That's obviously the correct answer. Is a ghost. So, yeah. Speaking of ghosts, I am cracking out the what's it called again? The Mammoth Book of Thrillers, Ghosts and Mysteries. I'm cracking this out again for our next story for tonight, which I'm pretty sure I must have taken a picture of and put it in the Discord. Fwah! Yeah, it's a very fwah book. Yeah, I must have taken a picture of this in the Discord. If not, I'll do it afterwards. It's a big black tome with a picture of a bat on it. It's great. It feels like it should be in the set for some kind of vampire movie. And it is chunky. So yeah, I have linked the text up top. Couldn't find a Gutenberg version, so you have to deal with this version, which actually is like a scan from like an old version of the like a old book. So that's kind of nice. Oh, you've been puzzling. Oh yes, I hope the puzzling's been going well. Sam and I have a jigsaw that we haven't finished yet. Well, I haven't started yet, actually. That we need to get going at some point soon. But puzzling proceeds apace. Yes. So the author of this one is the chap who wrote The Monkey's Paw, which is a very good story. There are slightly problematic ways of referring to other non-white people in it, shall we say. It hasn't aged well, but it's still kind of a good story. So maybe at some point I or Sam will try and read that and somehow modernize it somewhat. But this one isn't that. So this chap, good story, problematic execution. Yeah, the classic. W.W. Jacobs, which I can't remember. It was. He's got a. I can't remember what the W.W. stands for. It's like William Winning. I can't remember, but it was a good name. But yes, if we're all sitting comfortably, this is His Brother's Keeper by W.W. Jacobs. William Wymark Jacobs. That's the one. Anthony Keller
white and dazed, came stumbling out into the small hall and closed the door of his study noiselessly behind him. Only half an hour ago he had entered the room with Henry Martle, and now Martle would never leave it again until he was carried out of it. He took out his watch and put it back again without looking at it. He sank into a chair and, trying to still his quivering legs, strove to think. The clock behind the closed door struck 9. He had 10 hours. 10 hours before the woman who attended to his small house came to start the next day's work. 10 hours. His mind refused to act. There was so much to be done, so much to be thought of. God, if only he could have the last 10 minutes over again and live it differently. If Martle only had not happened to say that it was a sudden visit and that nobody knew of it. He went into the back room and, going to the sideboard, gulped down half a tumbler of raw whiskey. It seemed to him inconceivable that the room should look the same. This pleasant room, with etchings on the walls and his book face downwards, just as he had left it to answer Martle's knock. He could hear the knock now, and the empty tumbler smashed in his hand, and he caught his breath in a sob. Somebody else was knocking. He stood for a moment, quivering, and then, wiping some of the blood from his hand, kicked the pieces of glass aside and stood irresolute. The knocking came again, so loud and insistent that for one horrible moment he fancied it might arouse the thing in the next room. Then he walked to the door and opened it. A short, sturdy man, greeting him noisily, stepped into the hall.
"Thought you were dead," he said breezily. "Hello."
"Cut myself with a broken glass," said Keller, in a constrained voice.
Look here, that wants binding up," said his friend.
"Got a clean handkerchief?" He moved towards the door and was about to turn the handle when Keller flung himself upon him and dragged him back. "Not there," he said thickly. "Not there."
"What the devil's the matter?"
inquired the visitor. Keller's mouth worked.
"Somebody in there," he muttered. "Somebody in there. Come here."
He pushed him back into the back room and in a dazed fashion motioned him to a chair.
"Thanks, rather not," said the other stiffly. "I just came in to smoke a pipe. I didn't know you had visitors. Anyway, I shouldn't eat them. Good night."
Keller stood, staring at him. His friend stared back. Then suddenly his eyes twinkled and he smiled roguishly.
"What have you got in there?"
he demanded, jerking his thumb towards the study. Keller shrank back.
"Nothing," he stammered. "Nothing.
Oh," said the other.
"All right, don't worry. Mum's the word. You quiet ones are always the worst. Be good."
He gave him a playful dig in the ribs and went out chuckling. Keller, hardly breathing, watched him to the gate and, closing the door softly, bolted it and returned to the back room. He steadied his nerves with some more whiskey and strove to steel himself to the task before him. He had got to conquer his horror and remorse, to overcome his dread of the thing in the next room, and put it where no man should ever see it. He, Anthony Keller, a quiet, ordinary citizen, had got to do this thing. The little clock in the next room struck 10. 9 hours left. With a soft tread he went out at the back door and, unlocking the bicycle shed, peered in. Plenty of room. He left the door open and, returning to the house, went to the door of the study. Twice he turned the handle and softly closed the door again. Suppose when he looked in at Martle, Martle should turn and look at him. He turned the handle suddenly and threw the door open.
Martel was quiet enough. Quiet and peaceful, and perhaps a little pitiful. Keller's fear passed, but envy took its place. Martel had got the best of it after all. No horror-haunted life for him, no unavailing despair and fear of the unknown. Keller, looking down at the white face and battered head, thought of the years before himself. Or would it be weeks? With a gasp he came back to the need for action, and taking Martel by the shoulders drew him, with heels dragging and scraping, to the shed. He locked the door and put the key in his pocket. Then he drew a bucket of water from the scullery tap and found some towels. His injured hand was still bleeding, but he regarded it with a sort of cunning satisfaction. It would account for much. It was a long job, but it was finished at last. He sat down and thought, and then searched round and round the room for the overlooked thing which might be his undoing. It was nearly midnight, and necessary, unless he wanted to attract the attention of any passing constable, to extinguish or lower the companionable lights. He turned them out swiftly, and, with trembling haste, passed upstairs to his room. The thought of bed was impossible. He lowered the gas, and, dropping into a chair, sat down to wait for day. Erect in the chair, his hands gripping the arms, he sat tense and listening. The quiet house was full of faint sounds, odd creakings, and stealthy rustlings. Suppose the suddenly released spirit of Martel was wandering around the house. He rose and paced up and down the room, pausing every now and then to listen. He could have sworn that there was something fumbling blindly at the other side of the door, and once, turning sharply, thought that he saw the handle move. Sometimes, sitting and sometimes walking, the hours passed, until in the distance a cock smelt the dawn, and a little later the occasional note of a bird announced the approach of day. In the bright light of day his courage returned, and dismissing all else from his mind, he thought only of how to escape the consequences of his crime. Inch by inch he examined the room and the hall. Then he went into the garden, and going round the shed, satisfied himself that no crack or hole existed that might reveal his secret. He walked the length of the garden and looked about him. The nearest house was 100 yards away, and the bottom of the garden screened by trees. Near the angle of the fence he would dig a shallow trench, and over it pile up a rockery of bricks and stones and earth. Once started, he could take his time about it, and every day would make him more and more secure. There was an air of solidity and permanency about a rockery that nothing else could give. He was back in the house when the charwoman arrived, and, in a few words, told her of his accident of the night before. "I cleaned up the mess as well as I could," he concluded. Mrs. Howe nodded. "I'll have a go at it while you're having your breakfast," she remarked. "Good job for you, sir, that you ain't one of them that faints as faints at the sight of blood." She brought coffee and bacon into the little back dining room, and Keller, as he sat drinking his coffee and trying to eat, heard her at work in the study. He pushed away his plate at last, and filling a pipe from which all flavour had departed, sat smoking and thinking. He was interrupted by Mrs. Howe. She stood in the doorway, with a question which numbed his brain, and for a time arrested speech. "Eh?" he said at last. "Key of the bicycle shed,"
repeated the woman, staring at him. "You had a couple of my dusters to clean your bicycle with." Keller felt in his pockets, thinking. He said at last. "I'm afraid I've mislaid it. I'll look for it presently." Mrs. Howe nodded. "You do look bad," she said with an air of concern. "Perhaps you hurt yourself more than what you think." Keller forced a smile and shook his head, sinking back in his chair as she vanished, and trying to control his quivering limbs. For a long time he sat inert, listening dully to the movements of Mrs. Howe as she bustled to and fro. He heard her washing the step at the back door, and after that a rasping, grating noise to which at first he paid but little heed. Then there was a faint, musical clinking, as of keys knocking together. Keys! He sprang from his chair like a madman and dashed to the door. Mrs. Howe, with a bunch of odd keys tied on a string, had inserted one in the lock of the bicycle shed and was trying to turn it. "Stop!" cried Keller in a dreadful voice. "Stop!" He snatched the keys from her and, flinging them from him, stood mouthing dumbly at her. The fear in her eyes recalled him to his senses. "Spoil the lock," he muttered. "Spoil the lock. Sorry, I didn't mean to shout. No sleep all night. Neuralgia. Afraid my nerves are wrong." The woman's face relaxed and her eyes softened. "I saw you weren't yourself as soon as I saw you this morning," she exclaimed. She went back into the house, but he thought she eyed him curiously as she passed. She resumed her work, but in a subdued fashion, and 2 or 3 times that morning, meeting his eyes, nervously turned away her own. He realized at last that he was behaving in an unusual fashion altogether, in and out of the house, and in the garden, never far from the shed. By lunchtime he had regained control of himself. He opened a bottle of beer, and, congratulating Mrs. Howe upon the grilling of the chops, went on to speak of her husband and the search for work which had been his only occupation since his marriage 10 years before. Some of the fear went out of the woman's eyes, but not all, and it was with obvious relief that she left the room. For some time after lunch Keller stayed in the dining room, and that in itself was unusual. 2 or 3 times he got up and resolved, for the sake of appearances, to take a short walk. But the shed held him. He dared not leave it unguarded. With a great effort he summoned up sufficient resolution to take him to the bottom of the garden and start his gruesome task. He dug roughly, avoiding the shape which might have aroused comment from any chance visitor. The ground was soft, and in spite of his injured hand, he made good progress, breaking off at frequent intervals to listen or to move aside and obtain an unobstructed view of the shed. With a short break for tea, he went on with his task until he was called in to his simple meal at 7. The manual labour had done him good, and his appearance was almost normal. To Mrs. Howe he made a casual reference to his afternoon's work, and questioned where to obtain the best rock plants. With her departure after she had cleared away, fear descended upon him again. The house became uncanny, and the shed a place of unspeakable horror. Suppose his nerve failed and he found himself unable to open it? For an hour he paced up and down in the long twilight, waiting for the dark. It came at last, and, fighting down his fears and nausea, he drew the garden barrow up to the shed and took the key from his pocket. He walked to the front gate and looked up and down the silent road. Then he came back and, inserting the key in the lock, opened the door, and, in the light of an electric torch, stood looking down at what he had placed there the night before. With his ears alert for the slightest sound, he took the inhabitant of the shed by the shoulders and, dragging it outside, strove to lift it into the barrow. He succeeded at last, and, with the rigid body balanced precariously and the dead face looking up into his, seized the handles and slowly and silently took Martel to the place prepared for him. He did not leave him for a long time. Not until the earth was piled high above him in a circular mound and a score or two of bricks formed the first beginnings of a rockery. Then he walked slowly up the garden and, after attending to the shed, locked it up and went indoors. The disposal of the body gave a certain measure of relief. He would live, with time for repentance and perhaps for forgetting. He washed in the scullery, and then, fearing the shadows upstairs, drew the heavy curtains in the dining room to shut in the light and settled himself in an easy chair. He drank until his senses were deadened, his nerves quietened, his aching limbs relaxed, and he fell into a heavy sleep. He awoke at 6, and, staggering to his feet, drew back the curtains and turned out the gas. Then he went upstairs, and, after disarranging his bed, went to the bathroom. The cold water and a shave, together with a change of linen, did him good. He opened doors and windows and let the clean, sweet air blow through the house. The house which he must continue to inhabit because he dare not leave it. Other people might not share his taste for rockeries. To the watchful eye of Mrs. Howe, he appeared to be almost himself again. The key of the shed had turned up, and he smiled as he presented her with her precious dusters. Then he rode off on his bicycle to order slabs of stone and plants from the nearest nurseryman. He worked more and more leisurely as the days passed, and the rockery grew larger and more solid. Every added stone and plant seemed to increase his security. He ate well, and, to his surprise, slept well. But every morning misery opened his eyes for him. The garden was no longer a place of quiet recreation. The house, which was part of the legacy that had so delighted him only a year before, was a prison in which he must serve a lifelong sentence. He could neither let it nor sell it. Other people might alter the garden and dig. Since the fatal evening he had not looked at a newspaper for fear of reading of Martel's disappearance, and in all that time had not spoken to a friend. Martel was very quiet. There were no shadows in the house, no furtive noises, no dim shape pattering about the garden by night. Memory was the only thing that assailed him, but it sufficed. Then the dream came. A dream confused and grotesque, as most dreams are. He dreamt that he was standing by the rockery, in the twilight, when he thought he saw one of the stones move. Other stones followed suit. A big slab near the top came slithering down, and it was apparent that the whole pile of earth and stone was being shaken by some internal force. Something was trying to get out. Then he remembered that he was buried there, and had no business to be standing outside. He must get back. Martel had put him there, and for some reason which he was quite unable to remember, he was afraid of Martel. He procured his tools and set to work. It was a long and tedious job, and made more difficult by the fact that he was not allowed to make a noise. He dug and dug, but the grave had disappeared. Then, suddenly, something took hold of him and held him down. He could neither move nor cry out. He awoke with a scream, and for a minute or two lay trembling and shaking. Thank God it was only a dream. The room was full of sunlight, and he could hear Mrs. Howe moving about downstairs. Life was good, and might yet hold something in store for him. He lay still for 10 minutes, and was about to rise when he heard Mrs. Howe running upstairs. Even before her sudden and heavy rapping on the door, he scented disaster. "Mr. Keller! Mr. Keller!" "Well?" he said heavily. "Your rockery!" gasped the charwoman. "Your beautiful rockery! All gone!" "Gone?" shouted Keller, springing out of bed and snatching his dressing gown from the door. "Pulled all to pieces," said Mrs. Howe as he opened the door. "You'd never see such a mess. All over the place, as if a madman had done it." In a mechanical fashion, he thrust his feet into slippers and went downstairs. He hurried down the garden and, waving the woman back, stood looking at the ruin. Stones and earth were indeed all over the place, but the spot that mattered was untouched. He stood, gazing and trembling. Who could have done it? Why was it done? He thought of his dream, and the truth burst upon him. No need for his aching back and limbs to remind him. No need to remember the sleepwalking feats of his youth. He knew the culprit now. "Shall I go for the police?" inquired the voice of Mrs. Howe. Keller turned a stony face upon her. "No," he said slowly. I'll speak to them about it myself." He took up the spade and began the task of reconstruction. He worked for an hour, and then went in to dress and breakfast. For the rest of the day he worked slowly and steadily, so that by evening most of the damage had been repaired. Then he went indoors to face the long night. Sleep, man's best friend, had become his unrelenting enemy. He made himself coffee on the gas stove and fought his drowsiness cup by cup. He read and smoked and walked about the room. Bits of his dream that he had forgotten came back to him and stayed with him. And ever at the back of his mind, and ever at the back of his mind was the certainty that he was doomed. There was only one hope left to him. He would go away for a time, far enough away to render a visit home in his sleep impossible. And perhaps the change of scene would strengthen him and help his frayed nerves. Afterwards it might be possible to let the house for a time on the condition that the garden was not interfered with. It was one risk against another. He went down the garden as soon as it was light and completed his work. Then he went indoors to breakfast and to announce his plans for sudden departure to Mrs. Howe, his white and twitching face amply corroborating his tale of neuralgia and want of sleep. "Things'll be all right," said the woman. "I'll ask the police to keep an eye on the house of a night. I did speak to one last night about them brutes as destroyed the rockery. If they try it again, they may get a surprise." Keller quivered, but made no sign. He went upstairs and packed his bag, and 2 hours later was in the train on his way to Exeter, where he proposed to stay the night. After that, Cornwall, perhaps. He secured a room at an hotel and went for a stroll to pass the time before dinner. How happy the people in the streets seemed to be, even the poorest. All free and all sure of their freedom. They could eat and sleep and enjoy the countless trivial things that make up life. Of battle and murder and sudden death they had no thought. The light and bustle of the dining room gave him a little comfort.
After his lonely nights, it was good to know that there were people all around him, that the house would be full of them whilst he slept. He felt that he was beginning a fresh existence. In future he would live amongst a crowd. It was late when he went upstairs, but he lay awake for a few minutes. A faint sound or two reached him from downstairs, and the movements of somebody in the next room gave him a comfortable feeling of security. With a sigh of content, he fell asleep. He was awakened by a knocking which sounded just above the head of his bed and died away almost before he had brushed the sleep from his eyes. He looked around fearfully, and then, lighting his candle, lay listening. The noise was not repeated. He had been dreaming, but he could not remember the substance of his dream. It had been unpleasant, but vague. More than unpleasant, terrifying. Somebody had been shouting at him. Shouting. He fell back with a groan. The faint hopes of the night before died within him. He had been shouting, and the strange noise came from the occupant of the next room. What had he said, and what had his neighbour heard? He slept no more. From somewhere below he heard a clock toll the hours, and, tossing in his bed, wondered how many more remained to him. Day came at last, and he descended to breakfast. The hour was early, and only 2 other tables were occupied, from one of which, between mouthfuls, a bluff-looking elderly man eyed him curiously. He caught Keller's eye at last, and spoke. "Better?" he inquired. Keller tried to force his quivering lips to a smile. "Stood it as long as I could," said the other. "Then I knocked. I thought perhaps you were delirious. The same words over and over again sounded like mockery and mortal. Mockery and mortal. You must have used them 100 times. Keller finished his coffee and, lighting a cigarette, went and sat in the lounge. He had made his bid for freedom and failed. He looked up the times of the trains to town and rang for his bill. He was back in the silent house, upon which, in the fading light of the summer evening, a great stillness seemed to have descended. The atmosphere of horror had gone, and left only a sense of abiding peace. All fear had left him, and pain and remorse had gone with it. Serene and tranquil he went into the fatal room, and, opening the window, sat by it, watching the succession of shadowy tableaux that had been his life. Some of it good, and some of it bad, but most of it neither good nor bad. A very ordinary life until fate had linked it for all time with that of mortals. He was a living man bound to a corpse with bonds that could never be severed. It grew dark, and he lit the gas and took a volume of poems from the shelves. Never before had he read with such insight and appreciation. In some odd fashion, all his senses seemed to have been sharpened and refined. He read for an hour, and then, replacing the book, went slowly upstairs. For a long time he lay in bed thinking and trying to analyse the calm and indifference which had overtaken him, and, with the problem still unsolved, fell asleep. For a time he dreamt, but of pleasant, happy things. He seemed to be filled with a greater content than he had ever known before, a content which did not leave him even when those dreams faded and he found himself back in the old one. This time, however, it was different. He was still digging, but not in a state of frenzy and horror. He dug because something told him it was his duty to dig,
and only by digging could he make reparation. And it was a matter of no surprise to him that Martel stood close by, looking on. Not the Martel he had known, nor a bloody and decaying Martel, but one of grave and noble aspect. And there was a look of understanding on his face that nearly made Keller weep. He went on digging with a sense of companionship such as he had never known before. Then, suddenly, without warning, the sun blazed out of the darkness and struck him full in the face. The light was unbearable, and with a wild cry he dropped his spade and clapped his hands over his eyes. The light went, and a voice spoke to him out of the darkness. He opened his eyes on a dim figure standing a yard or two away. "I hope I didn't frighten you, sir," said the voice. "I called to you once or twice, and then I guessed you were doing this in your sleep." "In my sleep," repeated Keller. "Yes." "And a pretty mess you've made of it," said the constable with a genial chuckle. "Lord, to think of you working at it every day and then pulling it down every night. Shouted at you, I did, but you wouldn't wake." He turned on the flashlight that had dazzled Keller and surveyed the ruins. Keller stood by, motionless and waiting. "Looks like an earthquake," muttered the constable. He paused and kept the light directed upon one spot. Then he stooped down and scratched away the earth with his fingers, and tugged. He stood up suddenly and turned the light on Keller, while with the other he fumbled in his pocket. He spoke in a voice cold and official. "Are you coming quietly?" he asked. Keller stepped towards him with both hands outstretched. "I am coming quietly," he said in a low voice. "Thank God." The end. Don't kill people, folks. And, don't bury them in your garden. And don't sleep dig. I guess. Grave aspect, yeah, I know, it was good. Also, good night, Yumika. I mean, obviously, you're off now, but thank you for being here. Creepy. I know. I really liked that one, honestly, as a murder tale. I quite like. I quite like the stories that. It seems too stressful to try to cover up a murder. Yeah, the horror of guilt. That's the thing. Is like, I quite like the stories that are sort of from the perspective of someone who has just done a murder, and how that completely screws with people. Because turns out don't do murder. But yeah, that, like, having that with sleep gardening, yes. Telltale Heart, but with sleep gardening, yeah. But like having that but with sleepwalking, sleep activities, I thought was a really neat touch, actually. I really enjoyed that one. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed. And a one man's sudden obsession with rockeries. So yeah. Thanks for the read. Well, thank you very, very much for being here. It's always lovely to see everybody. So yeah, I'm gonna go see if we've got anybody. I assume Stephen's probably on. Is Stephen on? Stephen is on. So yeah, Sam will possibly be back on Saturday. Not 100% sure on that yet. We'll see what happens. But yes, if he is, he will be continuing with Kidnapped. And if not, I'll be back next Wednesday with more short stories. But yes, thank you all very much for being here. You're all wonderful people. It's always very, very lovely to have you all here. And
yeah, go take care of yourselves. Be the good people that you are. And yeah, we shall see you again soon. So yeah, goodbye.